Why you should be selling these players for second round rookie picks right now. This video is from the rebuilder's frame of mind. As a rebuilder, you're looking to sell off players and you're buying picks because you want to accomplish a couple of these goals. You're trying to get younger, you're trying to retool, you're trying to get off of aging assets or risky assets so that you can rebuild and retool. And sometimes you guys might just want to be tearing things down, get all that production off of your team so you can tank your own rookie pick. And there's other kind of extenuating circumstances that we'll talk about where maybe you just like the rookies in that range of the draft. You want to get one of them on your roster, or maybe you're cashing out on a player who you think might be at peak value and you want to get that risk off of your team. I would say, quick disclaimer before we get into this, don't take these trades one for one as verbatim. I would never sell this player for that player. He would never go for that in my league. We're basically talking about this from the frame of mind that you're trying to rebuild. You're trying to get these assets off your team. And from the contender side of things, it might be a win-win for both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, there's going to be a lot of comments. We already know that's going to be the case because people are just going to zoom in the video, see the names we're talking about, automatically make the comparison to what their league market is. We have to generalize it as much as we can because, quite frankly, there's just such a wide array of different league markets. I explained this in this last video, but if you're in a veteran contending type of market, some of these players you might be able to get better prices for. Like we'll go, for example, in the 201 to 204 section, one of the names you have listed is Alvin Kamara. If you're in a more casual league, redraft-centric league, maybe you can get late first-round capital for Alvin Kamara. The point not necessarily is the exact amount we're talking about in this video. It's just generalizing the amount on the market that you can currently get for these guys based off the wide array of leagues. And again, making those micro differences if your league is slightly different than what we're talking about in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, similar to what we did in the last video, talking about second round rookie picks, we're going to give you guys our rookie tiers. Who are we actually taking in this range? And then based on those rookie tiers, if you're trying to rebuild, what kind of aging assets can get you into that territory so that you can pivot from, let's say, Alvin Kamara, who you brought up, to one of these rookies. In the 201 to 204 range, extending from that 112 tier, we have Caleb Johnson, Luther Burden, RJ Harvey, Jackson Dart, and Jaden Higgins. If you're trying to sell a running back, you maybe want to pivot them straight up into Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey. Trying to sell a wide receiver, Luther Burden, Jaden Higgins makes sense. Trying to sell a quarterback, maybe you can pivot that right into Jackson Dart. And the tight ends, if they were still on the board, obviously would be great options for you to pivot as well. So some of the guys that if you're a rebuilder, you should be looking to sell for second round rookie picks in the 201 to 204 range that I have listed here. We'll start with like the pure production aging assets that you want to get off your team. We have Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, and Tyreek Hill. Those are three guys that I think are really, really good. Get them off of your roster. A contender is going to be interested in them. You think about Alvin Kamara, he's been a PPR RB1 for the last couple of years. Joe Mixon, same thing. Those guys get a lot of volume, but the reason you'd want to get them off of your roster is that they're both approaching like 29, 30 years old. Both have a lot of touches under their belt. Joe Mixon and Kamara, I would say, managed to dodge significant running back competition in the draft. Devin Neal added to the Saints. Woody Marks added to the Texans. Those are day three guys. They weren't like, Quinshon Judkins or whatever that were added to the team. But as a rebuilder, you should want this production off your roster. It'll tank your own rookie pick, and it will also alleviate some of that risk that a guy like Alvin Kamara goes down with injury. Suddenly he's not worth a lot. Contenders are going to be excited to trade for these players. Same goes for Tyreek Hill too. Tyreek Hill, a little bit of a risky asset at this point in time because of what he's represented with the Dolphins, but a contender should be willing to trade a 201 to 204 caliber rookie pick for a guy like Tyreek Hill. And if you just think of the one-for-one swap, you could swap Tyreek for Luther Burden. That would be an interesting thing that you could do for a rebuilding team.
Yeah, and it may be harder to get early second round capital in maybe leagues that we play in. Maybe if you're in one of our leagues over in FSC, I understand that. But like you said, with those leagues in mind that focus on what players did last year, focus on the fact that Alvin Kamara, was an RB1 in fantasy, Joe Mixon, an RB1 in fantasy, Tyreek Hill has been a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy within the last couple of years, you should be able to get this on an average market.
Yeah, and we can rope in David Montgomery, who's one of the ads that you have. But we'll talk about the guys that are more risk-averse sells, but David Montgomery also fits the description. He's been a productive RB2 or so in fantasy the last couple of years. Heavy touchdown score for the Detroit Lions. Part of the reason why we'd maybe want to be selling some of these players is because we don't necessarily think their projections are going to maybe hold up. Kamara, like we said, getting older, injury concerns, offensive concerns. Joe Mixon, kind of tapered off down the stretch last season. Same goes for Tyreek Hill as a consistent top 5 fantasy wide receiver. We saw him finish like wide receiver 30 in points per game last year. Even when Tua was on the field, he didn't look the same. And then with David Montgomery, part of the reason why I think he might be a good sell for this price tag, other than just the fact that he's an older running back and you should be willing to sell players like that as rebuilders, is that Jahmyr Gibbs is an ascending player. David Montgomery might have his workload eaten into more and more, especially on the goal line where David Montgomery does most of his damage. And Ben Johnson's no longer there, who was kind of the architect of using these guys perfectly in tandem.
Yeah, again, I like David Montgomery in redraft. I think he's a fine pick in that mid-single digit round range. But realistically, unless there was an injury to Jahmyr Gibbs, he just doesn't really have that bottom line ceiling at 27 years old to be able to, again, if you're rebuilding, make it not worth diving into a Caleb Johnson, diving into an RJ Harvey, a Luther Burden, Jackson Dart, Jaden Higgins, like we have listed there. That's just my thought on David Montgomery. We can go on, like you said, to the risk-averse players. Your guy, Sam Darnold, and then I have 3 listed here. Sam Darnold and my quarterback, Anthony Richardson, kind of similar vibes there. Sam Darnold, more certainty in terms of his starting spot with Seattle, but they do sneakily have an out in his contract after this year, and they did just take a day 2 quarterback with Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, part of it is that we just don't really believe in these players given their current price. Yep. Like Sam Darnold, I think is would probably get another starting job somewhere else if, let's say, he didn't have a great season for Seattle and Milroe took over and they wanted to roll with Milroe going forward or something like that. He has enough fans around the NFL that he would probably get a bridge deal somewhere or something like that. But I think if you can cash out right now for an early second round pick, transition him straight up into range? Jackson Dart, like why would you not do that? That would be something that I would be very comfortable doing. Or regardless of quarterback, maybe you just have Darnold like on my listener dynasty team, for example. Darnold's my 4th quarterback. If I wanted to sell Darnold because I just don't feel like holding that asset, transition him straight up into a Caleb Johnson, a Burden, an RJ Harvey, a Jaden Higgins, why would I not do that?
Yeah, liquidate him, especially in that perspective. If you drafted him as your quarterback 4 in a startup last year because he was expected to be a backup and you got him in the 21st round, you have an opportunity to cash out for an early second. I think that's the smartest play to be able to do. Avoid all the risk. The only positive right now, everybody knows he's a starting quarterback on a big deal. If you can capitalize on that, you may as well do your due diligence. That's similar to what I do with Anthony Richardson. I do believe in Anthony Richardson a little bit more than you do. I do think he will be the starter with the Colts. But the fact that they did bring in Daniel Jones, it's already a risk. It's not a certainty that he will end up being the starter. So I do think that risk has to be factored in. On top of that, like you said, it really just comes down to a micro perspective on the fact that Jackson Dart is a 25th overall pick going to the New York Giants. I think at this point, he has to be ranked ahead of Anthony Richardson. So the fact that I can basically one for one swap Anthony Richardson for Jackson Dart in this range, I am very comfortable with doing.
Yeah, Richardson's the scary one here because very easily he could make us look stupid for saying early second you should sell him for this because he's only 23 years old. If he has a much better season this year and let's say Daniel Jones was the push he needed to work harder and be a better teammate and be a better quarterback and all that kind of stuff, then he's going to be worth way more than Jackson Dart this time next year. Like he just is because he runs the football and all that kind of stuff. But it's more of just the bottom line of like, I think there's like maybe a 10-15% chance that happens. And there's probably an 80 to 85% chance he straight up loses his job.
Yeah, and I'm not saying like, oh yeah, he's just going to be completely worthless on the market even if he doesn't work out, because we have seen, for example, like maybe a guy like Justin Fields, for example, this past year got another opportunity to sign a deal with the Jets. I'm not saying if he doesn't work out with the Colts, he's not going to work out anywhere. I'm just saying at the current risk level of him staying on the Colts long term, being able to liquidate for just how good these prospects are. Like I said, Caleb Johnson, Luther Burden, RJ Harvey, a fresh start with the first round quarterback with Jackson Dart, 35th overall capital, Jaden Higgins. It's more so just I'm enamored with this rookie range that I'd be willing to let Anthony Richardson go given the risk levels of his current profile.
Yeah, and obviously if he hits, he's going to be worth more than this. But like, let's say based on what we know about Anthony Richardson, the information that we have at hand right now, that's what, a 2% chance that he absolutely smashes and is a first round startup pick again. Like it's probably not going to happen. I think best case scenario, you're looking at a Justin Fields type of asset here, who is currently worth an early second round pick himself. So why not sell for an early second round pick, re-roll into Jackson Dart at quarterback, or re-roll into RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, Luther Burden, or Jaden Higgins at a different position, because I just don't want to be holding the bag when he's Trey Lance 2.0. Like, because I do think that's probably what's the most likely scenario for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, again, I would say Justin Fields would probably be a medium range of outcome. Trey Lance would obviously be worst case scenario. And then, like you said, that top 15%, maybe he just becomes a franchise quarterback and you do take a big L. But given the fact that that is just such an unlikely outcome at this point, in our opinion, we're fine with liquidating him. The other two here, two young wide receivers that do have risky profiles in their own right. More so with Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall is a risk because obviously he suffered the gunshot wound, missed the majority of last year, did have some flashes, but for me personally, I'm looking at a sustained target earner that Juwan Jennings showed this past year. George Kittle obviously will operate as a big-time target on the team when he's healthy. Christian McCaffrey's coming back. Brandon Ayuk, I still hold in high regard comparative to Ricky Pearsall. It's really just who do you believe in at this point between Jennings and Pearsall, and I'm more on the Jennings side. So if Ricky Pearsall, I can net for a 201 to 204, a guy that I had valued in the mid to late second last year anyways, I'm fine with transitioning to all these wide receivers with Burden and Jaden Higgins or these other players that we have listed in this range, if this is what I can get for Pearsall. Similar case to Jameson Williams. I think he's a very good real-life player. I think the role that he plays stretching vertically for that Detroit Lions offense opens up a ton. However, losing Ben Johnson, I don't think it's going to have the hugest of impact on Sam Laporta or Amon St. Brown or Jahmyr Gibbs. The guys that I think are impacted most are more so the tertiary players. The creativity that Ben Johnson was able to implement Jameson Williams in the offense. This is a guy who had over 1,000 receiving yards on 91 targets. That level of efficiency was absolutely boosted with Ben Johnson calling the shots, scheming him open touches, in my opinion. And I just have a lot more questions on how John Morton's going to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's with both of these guys, it's not that I don't think they're like half decent bets. It's just that I think they're a little overvalued, and I would cash out for an early second round pick. Pearsall specifically, I have in like the early 50s of my wide receiver rankings. And it's not because I don't think he had a couple of good games last year. Like he had 3 games of top 15 production, week 10 against Tampa Bay, week 17 against Detroit, and week 18 against Arizona. He showed like real legitimate good production, but he was the single biggest reach of any wide receiver since 2016, according to the FSC prospect model, his profile versus other first round wide receivers. He also is valued as a top 36 dynasty receiver right now. He's valued higher than Josh Downs, who's the same age as him, who had way more production. He's valued higher than Jerry Jeudy, who's the number 1 receiver for his team right now. Higher than, some of these competitive Mike Evans, Devontae Adams types on the market as well. I just think for that price tag, it's not factoring in any of his risk. Like, yes, could Ricky Pearsall hit and be valued as a late first round pick or a mid to late first round pick this time next year? Sure. But his teammate Brandon Ayuk is 2 spots ahead of him on the dynasty wide receiver market right now. And Brandon Ayuk has a 5-6 year sample size of being one of the best real life receivers in the league, even if he's coming off of an ACL tear. So do I think Ricky Pearsall is a fine player? Do I think he's probably worth holding, generally speaking, on a rebuilding roster? Sure. But if you can cash out for a top 36 price tag right now, he's not worth that. He wasn't that good of a prospect, and he's kind of more in the line of like a Keon Coleman type versus where he's being valued, which is ahead of a guy like Josh Downs, who's already proven a lot more in 2 years than Pearsall has proven in, half a season.
Yeah, and for me personally, it's also just a vote of confidence on Jennings comparatively, because Jennings is currently cheaper on the market. And this is a guy down the stretch last year, 11 targets, 7, 5, 8, 9, 6, 10, 10. Like he was clearly the lead target ahead of Pearsall on that team when Brandon Ayuk got out. In fact, you could even made the case last year when Jennings and Deebo Samuel were coexisting that Jennings was the wide receiver 1 on this team.
Yeah, and I think you could definitely make the case that Kittle's better than all of them. Yeah. As far like a healthy
McCaffrey
Ayuk
might be the best of them all.
Yeah, a healthy Ayuk aside, like what is Pearsall going to? Let's say Ayuk misses the first 8 games of next season, because that would probably be best case scenario for Pearsall. Was he still the 3rd or 4th leading target on this team? Like I just don't see it, man. I said Josh Downs is the same age as him. Josh Downs a year younger than Ricky Pearsall and produced better than Zay Flowers, Tyreek Hill, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison, all these guys, and is valued 10 spots below him in terms of dynasty wide receiver rankings. I would transition Pearsall into Downs in an instant, and I wouldn't even think twice about it.
Hey, relax, though. Ricky Pearsall ain't too old. Latzer's 6 months older than him.
Yeah, no, he's almost 25 years old already. So, like, he's not, like, super young. And then Jameson Williams, I think you broke down perfectly fine there. I think he was the beneficiary of Ben Johnson scheming up this offense. And even if they're a top 5 to 10 unit again, which we all expect them to be, I don't think you're going to see that level of ungodly efficiency that you saw from Jameson Williams. He would have to take a pretty significant step as a target earner, and it's very tough there knowing that a lot broke right for him last year. Laporta had a down season. St. Brown obviously was dominant and will continue to be dominant, but they didn't really have a third receiver. They drafted with 3 third-round picks Isaac Tesla, who could factor into his role and whatnot. I just think that that Jameson Williams is probably destined to be a better and best ball guy. And would I value him as like a top 30 receiver like he's valued right now? Probably not. I would rather swing on some of these other dudes.
Yeah, those are my exact thoughts. 91 targets for 1,001 receiving yards. That's really what I come back down to. Extremely efficient. Shows that he can be a good player, but that's not sustainable. 91 targets over 1,000 receiving yards. Like, just contextualize that.
Yeah, and there's not a clear path for him to go up in targets. That's the issue. If somebody like, if St. Brown was like, or Laporta left in free agency or something like that, that would be one thing. But Jameson Williams is probably going to still need to be really efficient on his targets.
The usage is completely different. This isn't a 1-for-1 comp. I get that. It's going to happen when your role specifically is the deep threat from Jameson Williams. However, it is still funny to contextualize that he had more yards on 91 targets than DJ Moore had on 96 receptions.
That is insane. That is actually a really insane stat that he had that many things. And again, the Lions were like bar none the best offense in the league.
Sure.
Like, even if they regress to the top 5 offense, it's going to affect Jameson Williams probably primarily. Like, St. Brown, in my opinion, is the only one that's Ben Johnson proof in terms of
he's the safest for sure.
He's the safest one for sure. I think Laporta is going to see a bit of a downtick. I think Goff for sure is going to see a bit of a downtick. Jameson Williams is going to see a bit of a downtick. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery will probably be fine, but I do really doubt the abilities of Jameson Williams to be anything more than like a 1,000 to 1,100 yard receiver at any point in his career.
Yeah, and again, that's fine. Just the fact that his market value now is ahead of even like, it's funny because this is on our head, obviously the trade that happened this morning, but we're recording this after George Pickens was dealt to Dallas. If you just told me a 1-for-1 Pickens versus Jameson Williams, I'm taking Pickens every single time.
Yeah, and we don't really know a whole lot about either of their attitude levels because I think both of them are kind of knuckleheads. But at least with Pickens, maybe if he has a good season, Dallas would extend him or franchise tag him or something, and we'd get a extended period of time where he could be a number 2 receiver in a much pass-heavier offense than what Detroit has. And there's no Sam Laporta, and there's no dominant duo of running backs that you have to worry about taking away touches and opportunities from him. But let's move into the 205 to 210 range, which, as we talked about in last video, this is the Byshell Tootin, Cam Scattaboo, Jalen Milroe, Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, kind of Trey Harris range. So you're looking at 2 top 30 dynasty running backs in Tootin and Scattaboo. You're looking at a top 30 or so dynasty quarterback in Jalen Milroe, given the upside. And then you're looking at, early 50s, late 40s kind of wide receivers in Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, and Trey Harris. So with that in mind, as a rebuilder, selling off aging assets, again, a primary focus here. James Conner, DeAndre Swift, even though not aging, he is definitely more of a short-term asset. And then Aaron Jones are the guys that I have listed here. For James Conner, we talked about it in last video. We're buying Trey Benson, which means we kind of need to be selling James Conner to some degree. He's 30 years old, tons of touches under his belt, has dealt with injuries, never finished a full season. With these running backs, I would rather be a year too early, especially as a rebuilder. Let me just quickly preface that if you are a contender and you want to trade a mid-second round for James Conner, I think that's probably fine. It's just that if you're a rebuilder, you cannot hold James Conner through a rebuild.
Yeah, and in fact, if you watched our buy these veterans for these second-round picks video, we said it from the opposite sentiment. It all depends on the context of your situation. In fact, I would say the 3 guys I have listed, the 3 guys you have listed, mid to late second, if you're a contender, I think makes sense. It's just a lens of what scenario you're in. Are you a rebuilding team? Do you need to tear it down? Do you need to build through youth? Or are you a team that maybe has 1 or 2 veteran producers away from being a serious top 2 title contender in your league? That is the context you have to ask yourself. We're doing this from a rebuilding frame of mind. You mentioned your guys with James Conner, DeAndre Swift, and Aaron Jones. We'll talk about the individual cases in a second because my guys kind of similar theme. Isaiah Pacheco, Brian Robinson, and Cortland Sutton. You can very well make the case if you're a competing team and you wanted to throw a second at those guys, it would be perfectly fine. But if you're a rebuilder, you don't need that RB2 or wide receiver 2 level production that they'll give.
Yeah, and I think with Swift, Pacheco, and B-Rob specifically, because none of them are old. Like Swift is the oldest one, I believe, and he's 26. And Pacheco and Robinson about the same age, give or take. It's just that their projections are short-term. Like DeAndre Swift this year was very much in danger of losing his job in the draft. They just didn't, Henderson was sniped the pick before them. They couldn't trade up for Genty. They clearly are not committed to DeAndre Swift in Chicago. Could he be a back-end RB2 this year in terms of production? For sure. But my thought process on it, from both a redraft and a dynasty standpoint, is I think I would rather just take swings on Roschon Johnson for much cheaper than I would invest in DeAndre Swift. That's kind of my take on it. And if you have a guy like DeAndre Swift, whether it's now, during the season, before the season, just cash out, get him off of your roster, because there's a chance he loses his job midway through the year.
More context on that too. He has a potential out in his deal next year. If Chicago is not satisfied with DeAndre Swift this year, like you said, maybe he loses playing time, or maybe he is the starter for all that matters, has a relatively decent fantasy football season, but missed a couple cutback lanes or didn't trust his vision. You know what I mean? Like, there's always the intangible DeAndre Swift miscues that have stopped DeAndre Swift from his ascension to being one of the best running backs in the NFL. If the Chicago Bears notice that he was not up to their expectation, they have a complete out, basically only $1.3 million in dead cap to get away from having to pay him $6.4 million in 2026.
And again, if you're a contender and you want to sell the 207 for DeAndre Swift, I don't think that's outrageously bad. I think that's probably fine if you need a running back producer in a deeper league. But for my money, because we're selling these guys straight up for picks right now, I would much rather have Vishal Tuten. I would much rather have Cam Scadaboo at this point. I would rather re-roll into those players. Even if I was like a fringe contender, I would rather have those players, because they can ascend in value far beyond what DeAndre Swift can do, because DeAndre Swift has so much stink on him from previous seasons during his career. Even though he's been productive when he's gotten touches, he just seems to piss off his coaching staff to no end, to the point that they're going to try and find ways to pivot off of him. Maybe it's for Roshan Johnson or Kyle Manangi or whatever throughout the season, or maybe it's when the season's done and they pivot off of him in the draft in 2026. And the same could be said for Pacheco and Brian Robinson as well, because they're starters as of now. But Pacheco's got Kareem Hunt, who really ate into his workload last year, and Kareem Hunt was fine in the role that he had. So it wouldn't shock me if this is a total backfield committee. And Brian Robinson hasn't been able to stay on the field very often. I would say of the three of them, B-Rob is the one I feel the best about, just because when he's been healthy, he's been pretty good. He runs so like
too, though.
He runs so like violently that he's always getting banged up. And it's also like, I want pieces of the Commanders offense and whatnot, but like Eckler's in that situation. We don't know what Krosky, Merritt, or whatever other running backs they could add to this backfield would do. It's just, again, if you're rebuilding, you just re-roll them into Tuten, Scadaboo, Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, or Trey Harris. Like, there's no reason to hold the risk of these players.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it comes down to for me as well. So with Brian Robinson specifically, you mentioned, he's been sturdy throughout his career. 700 plus yards this year, peaked at 8 touchdowns, considering the fact that we saw the Commanders' offense really take flight with Jaden Daniels. The issue that I have, though, he had his biggest carry workload in 12 games of his rookie year, 205 carries in 12 games. The last 2 years in 2023 and 2024, 178 in 15 games, 187 in 14 games. They still have Austin Eckler on the roster. Now, Austin Eckler actually missed a good amount of time last year. There could very well be the case that if Austin Eckler is able to stay healthy, obviously we saw, Chris Rodriguez come in. There's just a little bit more worry about his workload even this year than I think that's being made let on. And on top of that, he is currently scheduled to be a free agent as a 27-year-old off his rookie contract after the year. We heard rumblings that Washington was maybe eyeing a running back on day one, on day two. I mean, we literally made the video of their interest in the running back position. I would be curious to see if maybe they said, you know what, if Hampton's not there at 29, we'll push it on into next offseason and look for a lead ball carrier by this time next year. That's what I think probably ended up happening. Likewise for the Chiefs, we heard rumblings, if Caleb Johnson was there in the third, maybe they would have taken them. Or they ended up only taking Brashard Smith. So obviously that's a vote of confidence this year for Pacheco. But Pacheco's been hurt. Pacheco was once a guy that we were talking about as an extension candidate. That seemingly is not going to be the case anymore. I feel the safest about the 1 year projection of Pacheco comparatively to Brian Robinson and DeAndre Swift, but they all represent the same thing in the sense that they have no security long-term after this season.
Yeah, exactly. I think all of these guys, if you were a contender, and especially early in the season, if you needed running back production, because I think B-Rob by week 4, we could be like, oh, what a great 10th round best ball pick he was. Like we're doing every year seemingly with Brian Robinson. But as the season goes along, he starts to taper off. He starts to get banged up and things of that nature. So with all three of these guys, again, if you're a contender, not a terrible mid-second round pick to send, but there's absolutely 0 point in holding them if you're a rebuilder, like you would be if you were watching this video. Aaron Jones, pretty self-explanatory. He's 30 years old. Any contender should be interested in Aaron Jones. And of all of these guys, for what it's worth, Connor, Swift, Pacheco, Brian Robinson, I would rather buy Aaron Jones over all of them, because I think the production you're getting on the field, maybe you could argue it between him and Connor, is probably the best of these guys, just because of what Minnesota has in their backfield, what Aaron Jones represents when he's healthy. He hasn't fallen off from a talent standpoint.
No.
He just gets injured all the time.
No, exactly. And they did add Jordan Mason, so there could be a case that maybe they're trying to preserve Aaron Jones a little bit more. Obviously, he wore down a little bit last year, but it's not like we haven't seen Aaron Jones operate in committees before. In fact, I think his best usage would be as a space back with Mason taking a lot of the dirty carries.
Yeah, dude, the guy had over 300 opportunities last year, Aaron Jones, and like he was RB20 in PPR points per game. Like, he's still a good player. Like, it's not that he's like a bad player by any means. He's just old. And again, if you are a rebuilder, there's no point in holding a guy like Aaron Jones on your roster.
Yeah, for sure. And the other two guys, that we talked about, you mentioned James Conner already. You made the case. If we're going to be high on Benson, we got to be a little bit lower on Conner, a guy that hasn't really finished an entire season. We talked about on last video in his career. Like, not even just last 4 years, not even just last 5 years. In his career, he has never finished a full season. So pretty self-explanatory there with James Conner. Courtland Sutton, again, a guy that I thought very productive last year, tethered to a good situation. If you're a contender and you want to hold Courtland Sutton, if you're a contender and you want to buy Courtland Sutton at this price, I think it would make sense. However, if you're trying to get younger, he is going to be 30 years old. He's still kind of tied in terms of his overall ceiling, I would say. It's not like he's going to go out there and have a 1,300-yard, 10-touchdown year. I don't think that's in the range of outcomes. You're kind of going to get what you expect there with 850 to 1,100 yards, 7 to 10 touchdowns for Courtland Sutton. If you want to get younger and you want to take the chance on the upside of guys like Jack Besh, Kyle Williams, Trey Harris comparatively in this range, this is the equatable cost I'd be willing to let Sutton go for.
Yeah, and again, if I was a contender, Jones and Sutton, I would say, are the two guys of this tier that I would feel best about trading for. But again, on rebuilding situations, you don't want to hold guys like this on your roster. So let's pivot in to the 211 to 212. Again, in terms of rookies that we would be looking at here, that's the Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin, Jake Ferguson territory of tight end. Jalen Knoll, Alec Io Manor type of wide receivers, and then, Dylan Sampson, maybe DJ Giddens types at running back. For us in this like 2-3 turn area. And again, the reason we have this broken up weirdly like this is because of how we have the rookies ranked. Obviously, best case scenario, you have a Kyle Williams on the board for you at 211, 212, which is often happening because he's buried in sleeper ADP. But at the same time, you plan for the worst case scenario when you're trading for a pick and just hope for the best case scenario. So some of the guys that I would be willing to sell, especially as a rebuilder tearing it down, for late second round picks. And again, I'd reiterate once more that if I was a contender, I'd be fine buying these players for the same price. Tony Pollard, Cooper Kupp, Jacoby Myers. Tony Pollard, I'm legit worried that Tajay Spears would take over that backfield, and I would rather just invest in Tajay Spears, who we talked about is available for us essentially the same price in last video. If you were more of a rebuilding team and you wanted to invest in a young running back who could gain value, Cooper Kupp, I just think is washed and is old. And if you're tearing it down, he should be the first player that you sell reasonably. Like, even if all you're getting is 211, 212 in a trade, and you could pivot him straight into Kyle Williams, best case scenario, worst case scenario, it's Jalen Knoll or something, I would do it, because Cooper Kupp could be a worthless asset 6 months from now when we see him on the field. I know he got a great contract with the Seattle Seahawks, but we saw a noticeable decline, and we have seen a noticeable decline over the last couple of years. So if you can get more than this, obviously, if you're like, I would never sell Cooper Kupp for that 211, 212, 210 or whatever, I can get the 203 for him in my league. Like, obviously sell him for more if you can. But in our leagues that you and I play in, 211, 212 is probably best that you're getting.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Cooper Kupp, if you look at the reception perception, if you look at the injuries piling up, a guy that's really thrived on short area separation, just doesn't simply have the juice that he once did. He was never like a fast, pure line speed type of player, but his movement ability in short areas is what made him so great in his prime when he was a Triple Crown caliber player. And those lower body injuries on top of, like I said, those overall reception perception metrics point to a clearly declining player and a guy that I'd be willing to get out at because of that risk level. Similar case. Now, I think Stephon Diggs, based off what we saw last season, is more put together. In fact, and given the situation that he could be the number one for Drake May, if you're a contender and you needed to pay at this price point, I wouldn't blame you. However, there is clear risk here. If you are not contending, I think you have to sell him off your team for a 211 to a 12 level price tag. He is an older receiver. He is coming off a significant knee tear. If he goes out there and doesn't look like he did even last year, he will lose market value. Not even lose market value. He'll be an untradeable asset. So this might be your final opportunity to sell Stephon Diggs if you're a rebuilder. Again, If he's healthy, I think he can be very productive. I think he'd be a very good ad for a contender. There's just too much risk level to hold through a rebuild. Travis Kelce, I mean, it is very simple. He considered retirement this offseason. He has 1 year left on his deal. Sounds like they're going to try to run it back. If the Chiefs make the Super Bowl, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, I'm not expecting Travis Kelce to return to the NFL for 2026. So if you can still sell for late second, even early third round type of price tags, I would be fully willing to. You might be able to get a productive year, maybe a mid tight end 1 year, but even still, the days of him being a top 3 level tight end, I think, are over.
Yeah, which is why he's more of mid tight end 1 kind of projection. And again, I actually think, like, legitimately, with every name that we have listed here, 211, 212 on a contender, I'd be fine trading for these players. Totally fine. But again, you have to re-roll into the rookie if you're a rebuilding team, or if you're looking to offload some risks that these guys fall off. Because of all the names listed here, Jacoby Myers was the best for fantasy last year. He was like 14.2 PPR points per game. He's been a top 24 receiver in points per game
prime
back-to-back years these past 2 seasons. But they added Jack Besh. He is 29 years old. It's not like you're going to miss Jacoby Myers' production if you pivot him into a rookie receiver, rookie tight end, rookie running back that ends up hitting for you. And again, the only reason you'd be selling Jacoby Myers for a mid to late second round pick in this situation is because you're not competing. You don't want to try and tank your own rookie pick and have Jacoby Myers putting up 16 points in week 16 when you're trying to finish with the 101.
I know you're going to love this, so I'm going to say it out loud. Even if you're not selling Jacoby Myers for a rookie pick, let's go trade him in a piece to get younger Jacoby Myers with Josh Downs.
Yeah, exactly. Or if Jack Besh is still on the board, why not just transition him right into his teammate now?
Exactly.
Because you're getting younger at that position. So yeah, like all these players. And the one I actually disagree with is Isaiah Likely, just because Isaiah Likely is still young. And I think he absolutely will go up in value in the coming years, because I think Mark Andrews is at least playing his very last season in Baltimore, if not might get dealt before the season's over.
He very well could be. It's more so a micro player take standpoint that I just prefer Mason Taylor and Terrence Ferguson in Dynasty than I do Isaiah Likely. So I
prefer Isaiah Likely to both of them.
That would be the difference.
That would be the difference.
I would rather re-roll top of the second round value. Obviously, Mason Taylor going to Tanner Engstrom with the Jets. Already sounds like there's going to be a plan in store for him. Opportunity to arrive as a number 2 target there. And with Terrence Ferguson, very, very athletic profile. Yeah, he's a raw talent, but he lands with the LA Rams, which I think from a situational standpoint is very good. Even just strictly from a projectable volume standpoint compared to what maybe we could expect in Baltimore. Not to mention, I also think Andrews, if he's healthy, is going to be the wide tight end there.
I don't disagree. I think Andrews is the better option. And if I was a contender, I would it's not actually that far off of a price tag for just buying Andrews as opposed to buying Likely. But if I was a rebuilder, I would be fine holding Likely through a rebuild rather than, trying to buy him or sell him or whatever. I actually think he's only 25 years old and could be the starting tight end for the Ravens a calendar year from now. And when he was a 60% route participation guy last year, he had multiple top 5 finishes on the week.
Yeah. I don't think he's an urgent sell. It's more so, like I said, just a micro player take standpoint that I prefer Taylor and Ferguson. That's really it.
That's totally fine. And like we already detailed here, you can re-roll Likely into Taylor and Ferguson or Fannin if you like Fannin like I do, pretty easily in that situation.
Likely Jr.
Yeah, exactly. And Likely Jr. Is also a lot younger than Likely there. But yeah, he's the only one I really have any qualms with, because I do think the point of trading off of these players is to get younger, offload some risk. They're not going to go that much higher in value. Like if you think about Pacheco and Brian Robinson, for example, you can sell them for a mid-second right now. Let's say they're producing like RB2s in fantasy this year. What are they worth? An early second? Like they're not going much up in value where they currently are. There's no shot on planet Earth you're getting a first-round pick for Isaiah Pacheco or Brian Robinson in any kind of serious league format. If you can, obviously take it. But the thing with all of these guys is that they're pretty close to peak value, and their value is dependent and predicated on how they produce. And we also have some question marks about a lot of these guys' ability to produce what they've produced in the past. So that's kind of why we're talking about potentially pivoting them into rookies. And like part of it too, like with rebuilders and wanting to trade for some of these players, is that you just want to go invest in a rookie. Like for example, you love Luther Burden in the 201 to 204 range. I love Byshel Tutin in the 205 to the 210 range. Sometimes I'm just like, I would rather have Byshel Tutin than Jacoby Myers just in a vacuum. Let's say it's a flex player for either situation for me and I'm like a fringe contender or something. Let me just go invest in the rookie that I really love.
Exactly. And that's what it comes down to. We really do like this class, especially compared to maybe the sentiment that you'll hear from others on this class. We just disagree on that regard. Like, we really do like the players in these ranges. That's why I'd be willing. Again, a lot of comments were like, how could you take this unproven rookie over this veteran who's produced? It's like, we believe in the rookies and especially the value accrual potential of said rookies.
Yeah, and obviously only 60% of these rookies are going to actually achieve that value accrual, at least in a calendar year from now. Maybe long term you get more than that. But I would say of all these territories, what is the one that you're most likely to trade back into? I know the answer is 201 to 204 for you because you want Luther Burden, I would imagine. So that was kind of a stupid question. But I actually think the 205 to 210 range is the one that I feel most comfortable trading back into because I love Tootin. I love Milroe. I like getting access to some of these receivers, Kyle Williams, Jack Best, Trey Harris. And I also quite like Cam Scadaboo as well. So like the late second, I'm more comfortable holding. Let's say if you have an asset and all you can get is the 211, 212 for it. I don't think that like there's a pretty significant drop off to me after like the Milrose and Scadaboos and Tootins and those guys. Like as much as I like Mason Taylor and Ferguson and Harold Fannin and Alec Manor and Jalen Nolan stuff, I think there's a pretty sizable drop off after that 210 range.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I mean, I will say if you are drafting on Sleeper, maybe your answer is early third because somehow Kyle Williams is just buried on their ADP.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that throws a wrench in all of this is that I've gotten Kyle Williams in the third round before, and I've gotten Kyle Williams at the 211, 212 a couple times as well in our Too Lazy to Set lineups league. While we were recording one video, I literally got him at 211 in that league because I had to scroll the F down for him. So again, this video was meant to be, you guys are a rebuilder or you're trying to be a rebuilder. You're trying to get younger. You're trying to retool. You're getting aging assets, risky assets off your roster. Maybe you're full on rebuilding. You're tearing it right down to the studs and you want that production off of your team. Or in the case of Jameson Williams, in the case of Ricky Pearsall, you just think there's a young asset that's a little bit overvalued right now, and you'd rather pivot into a rookie, re-roll into a Caleb Johnson, re-roll into a Luther Burden, re-roll into an RJ Harvey, whoever you're able to get, Jackson Dart at that point in the draft. So if you guys enjoyed this video, and we've done, this is like the fourth video kind of this series that we've done, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check out the trade for these veterans with second round picks, trade for these veterans with first round picks, trade away these veterans for first round picks. A lot of discussion there. If you're a rebuilder, you'll definitely like those ones. If you're a contender or you have a big dynasty portfolio like the two of us and you have multiple teams with multiple needs, then definitely check out all those videos. And of course, we did this video series to also give credence to our trade value charts, which is a tool on flockfantasy.com that you guys can use. If you have an asset that you want to sell, for example, you are not a big Rashee Rice believer. You don't think Rashee Rice is that good. You think he's overvalued, et cetera, et cetera. You're constantly getting people in your league beating your door down for him, and you have no idea what you should ask for in a trade. The trade value chart solves that problem. We have listed here Rashee Rice listed as a soft sell based on market value. 106 to 108 is his current market value. If you can get anything more than that, that would obviously be excellent in a super flex format. And that's what the trade value chart is for. If you're looking for future rookie picks, one mid first rounder plus in terms of a one quarterback price tag, that is what the trade value chart is for. If you think that's a good resource, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up, and you'll get 6 months for free on an annual sub, 7 days for free to try out the site before you really pay for anything, 30% off any of the packages using that code FSE. And when you sign up annually, you get a free team review voucher and a free buy, sell, hold report voucher that you guys can use to get advice personally for your dynasty teams from either of us. And we're going to be doing some dynasty team reviews tomorrow on our live stream. So stay tuned for that. That'll be around noon Eastern. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.